Well, warm welcome to you all again from wherever you are in the world, and a warm welcome to everybody who will be listening to this on recording a bit later on. I'd like us to start by just settling into this space together, because I know it's a very weird space, these little square boxes that we meet across. So I'm going to read a poem, and my invitation to you is to just take some deep breaths, and whatever's been going on in your world today, to set it aside for a little bit so that we can have this lovely conversation and deepen into the song that's singing in our bones. This is a beautiful poem. I often read it at the beginning of Feather, Fire, Stone and Bone to my students. It's by a dear friend of mine called William Ayotte. Some of you might know his work, and he created a beautiful book. If you don't know his work, Re-enchanting the Forest. It's a really beautiful book about life in magic. And this is his poem. Did you ever get up in the muddle before dawn, for no better reason than that you wanted to greet the sunrise? Did you ever dress quietly with serious intent and pick your way over wintry fields to arrive at a place that you once imagined bathed in the first clear light of morning? And did you wait as the dawning grey moved through purple to mauve to grey, from excitement to boredom to a kind of calm, as you gently noticed your insignificance? And did you mutter unfamiliar words that seemed to come from somewhere else, ancient words of dread and devotion, words of welcome and astonishment? And when at last the tired sun issued from the earth like a molten copper head, did you notice the hawk that flew at you, rose in a way that made everything sacred, stooped in a way that made the day blaze? Or did you sleepwalk into the morning, bending your dreams to another's purpose, listening to the news, half hoping for a cataclysm, anything to make the tired day more real? And that's an extract from A Challenge, Email from the Soul by William Ayotte. So my warm welcome to you. We're going to start talking about the song Singing in Our Bones in a moment, but I just wanted to give you all a bit of an overview of this evening. To begin with, I'm going to do some talking. I'll talk maybe for half an hour, 40 minutes. But then I think the most valuable thing would be to open to questions from all of you. And please feel free to raise your hand. If you can do that electronically, that helps, because there's a few pages and I'll be able to see it. And then I know that some of you have come along tonight with a view to listening in and finding out a little bit more about Animate Earth, our program, which is a year and a day long inquiry into animism. It's called Feather, Fire, Stone and Bone. I will put that to the end of the evening, and I'm delighted that two of our alumni are here, because I think it's much more valuable than me telling you it's great. They can tell you what their response was, what the journey was like for them, and how that's changed their life or changed their outlook and their relationship to all creation. So I'd like to just kind of introduce them quickly. I've got Ruth Dillon here.
Hello, everyone.
And Natalie Johnson, who's in America. Say hello, Natalie, because we won't be able to see you unless you say hello.
Hello, everyone. Happy to be here.
So at the end, we'll do that. So we might go on to about 8:15, just to include all of that, if that's okay. So let's start then with the old song Singing in Your Bones. I guess that many of you would have been attracted here tonight from that title, because maybe you sense an old song singing in your bones. And you wouldn't be alone. I think there is a tsunami, or there's an arising, or maybe our bones are singing more loudly these days as we have, as human beings, traveled so very far from a sense of connection with all creation, particularly here in the West. And there is something deep inside us, in our DNA, calling us home to an older way of knowing that it's not about creating some kind of a museum piece. It's about that sense of what really nourishes our deep humanity and our connectedness within the web of life that has become so disconnected over the years. So I would guess that some of you will have had flashes of experience as a child, or maybe it was last week where suddenly you felt really connected or deeply at home in the natural world in some way, as if you've been plugged into everything. And that is something that people tell me about this experience gradually as we unpack and build a relationship in different kind of courses and workshops and things I do. But very often, what they also tell me is that they've kept it a secret, or they've told very few people about it because they worry that they'd be seen as foolish or not normal or weird or any variation thereof. And I'm wondering for how many of you that might be true tonight, that you've had kind of similar experience, you've got a sense that there is something in the natural world that is really calling to you, and you've had kind of flashes of that experience, but you're really looking for how to do that more. Can I have a hands up from a few of you if that's something that is true for you? Yeah, sure. How many of you as well kept it quiet, or don't live in a community where it's okay to be speaking about things like that? Yeah, quite a few of you. It's a really difficult thing, isn't it? Because we live in this culture that tells us that that's not rational. And the difficulty is that we find ourselves right now at the very brittle edges of humanity. We've lived with this sense of disconnection, this culture that tells us that that only really values the rational since about 300 years at least here in the Western world, since what we call the Age of Enlightenment. Before then, here in the British Isles and the Western world, most of us were Christian animists, either Protestant or Catholic animists. But after the Enlightenment, anything that couldn't be scientifically proven or dissected or shown or demonstrated became kind of put into the realm of superstition. It became downgraded. The idea that you could gain wisdom from a river, that you could sit for hours in counsel with a mountain, that the tree at the top of your field might be a really good friend, was really rubbished, and it went underground. And sometimes poets spoke about it, but even they got ridiculed when that happened. And so we're carrying a really deep wound here in the West, the wound of separation. And we've got so far now alongside the cult of the individual. Do you all understand what I mean by that? This thing that we've been through for years upon years, where we've been told that the individual is the priority and that we must amass as much stuff and things for ourselves, and keep ourselves safe, and that nobody else is going to help us. That's a very unnatural way for us human beings, or any beings in nature, to live, because all other beings, as science is finding out increasingly, are part of a network, part of a community, a symbiotic community that support and coexist. And if you've ever listened to the teachings of Thich Nhat Hanh and the brothers of Plum Village and their sense of interbeing, that is much more where we came from here in these isles in the Western world. And that is how the majority of the indigenous populations of our world continue to see it. So we are living through potentially with this, we're carrying so much anxiety, separation. It's leading to depression. We are taking more pharmaceuticals. We are more depressed as a species than we ever have been before. And we are actually more cruel to each other and to the animals in our world than we ever have been before. And that's because we've started to see the natural world as a thing, as a resource, rather than as kindred beings. And that is damaging us as much as it's damaging the world. I would like to think that I would end my life looking back at this time as the time of great remembering. Some of you will know Joanna Macy's work, I'm sure, and she talks the time of the great turning. This age could be a time when we turn back to these deeper things, to a connection, a reconnection with all life. For me, I think about it as a time of remembering our soul as humanity and our connection. And I see the two as being interlinked, our connection with all living things, because it's a two-way nourishment. It's very easy for us as humans to think that we are the ones observing nature, curious about nature. But actually, if we sit quietly for long enough, we will find that nature and the natural world is looking at us and is observing us and curious about us in just the same way. And it's one of those strange things that we have here in the West, this distinction between us as humans and this thing that we call nature. For most indigenous communities, they don't have that distinction because they understand themselves as nature. And so this process of developing our porosity and coming back home to this song is about unlearning a whole lot of the culture that we have swallowed whole and finding a way through community and through practice to start to understand ourselves as deeply interwebbed beings. And it's a really beautiful journey, but it's not without its grief, because as we sing the song, as we find ourselves in the midst of that beauty, one of two things, there are many things that come up, but there's two things that classically come up each time. One is, why have I left myself live this long without really understanding this and living in this way? And the other thing is, oh my gosh, what are we as humans doing to this world? Now, animism and the way that we teach it, we understand humanity as part of the web of life. I speak to a lot of people who say, oh, the best thing for us right now is for humanity to disappear off the world and let this planet regenerate itself. I disagree with that. I understand where that's coming from. But if nature, she's powerful enough, if she really didn't want us here, we wouldn't be here. So that tells me that there is a role for us on this earth. And increasingly, those who are looking at these things are starting to understand us as keystone species. Not apex predators, but a keystone species in supporting, and we have the potentiality to support the enlivenment of the ecosystem. We have a huge capacity for good on these lands, in our small little square of land, on our little jigsaw piece of the world. If all of us were relating more deeply with it, falling back in love with it, then we would be able to change our patterns, because it's very difficult to care and to make changes to our habits unless we're doing it for something that we really, really love. And this work, it's not about where you are in the world. I often hear people saying, oh, I could do this work if I lived in the countryside, or it would be so much easier to do this if I didn't live in a flat, or if I had a garden. The reality is these times are so great that we're living through that we need to do it in whatever patch of land we have, even if it's, if we only thing we've got is a tomato plant on our patio, we can begin to build relationship with that and with the trees that we can see or the grass that we can see around us. It is available to all of us at all the time. The other part of this journey is reclaiming that which we lost during the time of the Enlightenment, the scientific Enlightenment. And that was the sense of our imagination as a valid way of knowing and understanding the world. So during the Enlightenment, we put away the imagination. It was confined to something untrustworthy, make-believe. Any of you here, like me, got told off in school for dreaming? Any dreamers amongst us here tonight? Every school report from kind of my junior years of about 7 had, she would do so much better if she didn't dream so much. It took me until I was 36 years old to realize that dreaming was actually a really, really important part of who I was and how I connected to all things. So this process also asks us to reconnect and to lean into and reframe how we've been taught to think about our imagination. The tradition that I come from, or I teach from, is the Brythonic tradition. It's the old traditions of these lands, held in a lot of the old stories and the old poetry. Generally these days talked about as the Welsh tradition, but it's not. It's the tradition of all of Britain before the time of the Saxons. And in that tradition, we understand, it's a very animistic tradition. So this animism and this way of thinking is very, it's in my language. You know, my language, in the Welsh language, everything is either a he or a she. There is no such thing as an it's, which you have in the English language. And so it's very easy to relate to the beingness of all life. But in the Brythonic tradition, the other world, the energetic world, the imaginary world, and what we call anufn, the other world where the ancestors live and exist, and the shining beings, it is understood as being enfolded in what we today call consensus reality. It is part and parcel. There is no real division of it. We are walking together all of the time. We are living in an enspirited world, and that all creation is talking to us at the same time, all the time. In terms of imagination, that tradition has no space for something that is just a made-up thing. The understanding of the imagination and of the inspiration that charges the imagination is that it comes directly from that other world, from the connection of all life. And we have a word for that. We call it nuivre. And nuivre is a very old word. It starts life back, as far as we can tell, from about the 6th century on, when we start to have written documentation. It starts off as something that describes ether. But down the generations, it comes to mean the energy that connects the web of life, that is running through everything that is living. It's the connective tissue of the web of life. So I can relate to the nuivre that is running through a tree, or running through that table over there that looks solid, but physicists will tell you, and I believe them, that it's a whole host of particles that are vibrating with a certain energy running through it. Now that energy that's running through and making it vibrate, that would be nuivre. And it's similar to the Eastern traditions of Japan and China, with their idea of the yin and the yang and wu and wei. So this understanding that our imagination is connected to all that, much closer to the idea that Freud and Jung had of the collective imagination, that it is this wellspring that is in creation that we can tap into. And so we understand then that imagination is part of the prompts of the universe, part of the prompts of all life connecting with us. And it's intimately connected to our instinct as well. And so, you know, if we start to think about that, 300 odd years of dismissing all of that and all of our natural instinct as well, and only being allowed really to focus our attention on what the ancient Greeks would talk about as logos. And for the ancient Greeks, they knew that for the human being to be in balance, they had to hold the mythos and the logos both alongside each other. So part of the work in listening to this old song and heeding its call is to open yourself to your imagination, to your dreams and your dreaming, and to inquire of what that's telling you, to make yourself porous to the prompts of all life. People often ask me, well, what is animism? For me, animism, well, not just for me, but animism is the baseline that all humanity at the very beginning, our first spiritual prompt as human beings has always been to find awe in the natural world. Until, you can see this through all what archaeology in prehistory tells us, right through the Mesolithic, until we become Neolithic farmers. And then things start to shift because our relationship with the natural world becomes one of husbandry rather than one of being equals enmeshed in all of it. But it continues for many, many hundreds, if not thousands of years, until we get to a place where the monotheistic religions begin and we start to see the world in a different way. We start to separate mankind from the natural world, and we start to dampen down and deculture ourselves from the wildness and the wilderness within us, the green sap that rises through us all. So animism has a way of, it's an old way. It's deep, deep, deep in our DNA and in our bones. It is our first, as children, it tends to be our first spiritual instinct before we're taught anything else. If you watch children playing in nature, they are deeply enmeshed in it if they haven't been taught to fear it in any way. There is an impulse to imagination. There is an impulse to intertwine. There is a lack of fear. There is a healthy desire for exploration and a sense of oneness with all of that. It is our teaching and our culturalization that teaches that out of us. So in a way, animism is a reclaiming of a lot of that. It's a coming home to ourselves. I was 8 years old when I walked into a little clearing in the woodlands where it was woodland where my father had grown up, on the farm that my father had grown up, and I was playing hide and seek with my cousins. And I was quite a brave little soul. I was always wanting to go further into the woods and kind of get the best hiding place. And as my cousin was counting this day, I went a little bit further than I'd ever been before, and I stopped dead at the edge of this beautiful clearing of trees, and the sun was shining through these green leaves, casting beautiful beams of light in. I remember stopping dead and having this sense of, I suppose, reverence. At least that's the word that comes to me now when I think about it. And very gently and slowly stepping into that space and feeling connected to all things, intimately connected, as if I was being plugged in to all things. And I couldn't probably articulate that fully then. It's something that I've reflected on a lot through my life. But I know that I was different when I stepped out of that clearing and started running to find another place to hide. And I remember going back to my family and saying things like, I think I met God in the woods today, and them really not wanting to talk about it. And I remember going to my minister in Sunday school following Sunday and saying, I think I met God in the woods today, last week. And him saying, no, I don't think that could have been it. And maybe if we were talking now, he was a great man, actually, he would say something else. But it was very important that I heard that, because it made me look elsewhere. It put me on a journey that took for me about 30 years to find, going through different spiritual traditions, working with teachers all over the world, only to come back to an understanding that actually this thing is very simple. This connection with all beings is our birthright, and it's natural for us to do it. What happens is our culture, what we're taught, the things that we are told as children, and then we get in the way of that connection. And so much of the journey back to being able to sing that song in our bones is about reclaiming something that we probably very naturally had as children. So how do we do this? That's the next question that people ask me. And the one thing I tend to say is I think it's really difficult to do it alone. We're living in very challenging times. Our culture is certainly not talking openly still about this, even though, in the last, when I was 16 and looking in a bookshop for a book that might help me with any of this, there certainly wasn't anything out there. And if you joined, the Druids or the witches or anything else like that back then, you kept it really secret. And that's not the case anymore. People are talking about it, but it's not part of the general conversation down the pub on the weekend or anything like that. So trying to normalize and make it okay, and to have very subtle at first experiences witnessed and validated by others feels really important, because doing it alone against the mass of the populist culture that's out there is really difficult. So I would encourage you, if this feels like a path for you, to find a community, to find some friends, to find a community where you can talk openly. You can make those first hesitant steps towards sharing some of your knowledge. And what my experience is, as we do that, and as we, what I like to think of as, grow our roots in this, we can hold ourselves in those more challenging cultural spaces much more steadily when we're challenged about these things. And we might start to gradually wear it on our sleeve a little bit and feel comfortable with that. And what's really amazing when you do that is you find that other people have been looking for some answers. Other people are also yearning for somebody to say, do you know that sense you have of wonderment, of connection, of deep, deep connection with the natural world? That's okay. It's perfectly normal. It's your birthright. And yeah, I have it too. And I've ended up in all sorts of strange situations with chief executives and scientists, having these kind of conversations and then quietly saying, yeah, me too, but I find it really difficult in the job that I do or anything like that to show this kind of thing. So it's under the surface for many people, but really difficult to own. And why is it important at this time? Undoubtedly, we as human beings, the story of humanity, we have gone through some big changes and some big challenges in the whole of the period of human evolution. But we are certainly in a time of great change now. And it feels like an epochal change. We're going from a society where things aren't working anymore. The way things are just aren't working. Something needs to change. There are lots of bits of our world that are really breaking down. Something new wants to come in. And if you look at the prophecies and things all around the world in indigenous cultures, they've been kind of waiting for this. One way of talking about it, I know in South Africa, they talk about us moving from the time of fire into the time of water. And of course, what happens when fire and water meet is a lot of steam. Our financial systems are breaking down. And more than anything, our climate is breaking down. We are at the very edge. We're at a frontier in our existence as human beings on this planet, and we have some choices. I think most of us, if we're wise, would like to think that we can potentially make some changes, that all is not lost, that if enough people could see things in a different way, see why it was valuable to make these changes, fall back in love with the earth, see the value of making what is really often very difficult changes in life, then we would create a tipping point. And instead of waiting for the politicians and those in power to make change, it would kind of force the change, and we would kind of bring about some of the necessary changes. And we've seen this happen in small parts of the world already. It is also easy, and I find this myself, even though I teach this stuff and I've been teaching for 15 years, I can still sometimes feel that we are very few. And about 2 months ago, I ended up being invited to a gathering of international animists over in Norfolk. And it was an extraordinary eye-opener. There are communities all over the world that are deepening into this and forcing change and making change. I was there with scientists who are at the cutting edge of what they're doing, beginning to understand that kind of plants have ways of relating, that the more than humankind not only have culture but have language, are deeply sentient, have consciousness. And with a human rights lawyer, Cesar, who he spent his first 20 years in human rights, and he's now changed everything to become a lawyer for the more than human rights. And if any of you have read Robert McFarlane's book, Is a River Alive? Cesar is in that book. He is part of the team that were forcing through that legislation. And their aim is to create a precedence in law so that they can do that with a river. They might do it with the whales. It might be a mountain next, until essentially through legal means we get to understanding the sentience of all life, and that we're all part of a living web, a conscious web, a community of all life on this planet. It was a real eye-opener. From my piece in this jigsaw, my little piece of it is I want to support anybody who is interested in listening to that song in their bones, to find a way back to it, in order to awaken a community, and to gather circles of people and circles of people and circles of people rippling out, to get to that point where there's a tipping point of enough of us caring enough, loving enough to make significant change. Because there is an old way of seeing these in-between spaces, a bit like we've just passed Samhain or Calangaeaf, where the veils between the world are said to be thin. And traditionally, whenever the veils between the worlds are thin, It's a time when all sorts of change can happen. And the same is true about times of change or epochal changes in the world. How we do things now sets the tone for where we're going. The future really is in our hands. And we can spend time thinking that it's somebody else over there making the change, but actually, if we can all make a little change ourselves, we can kind of be the change we want to see in the world. That's probably a good point for me to close the formal part of what I wanted to say tonight. I think I've spoken for well nigh on long enough. I'm curious if there's any questions. I'm really happy to take any questions from anyone. If you could put your little electronic hand up. If you see at the bottom of the screens, those of you who are less familiar with Zoom, you'll see react, the little heart usually at the bottom of the screen with react. If you click that, it'll give you an option to raise your hand if you have a question. Aha, Juliet.
Hi, I'm going to try with the with my camera. Sorry, my internet is really dodgy. Thank you very much. All of what you say resonates and makes perfect sense to me. What I find I struggle with is the kind of everyday practice. I do live in a city. I absolutely hear what you say about still being able to connect and wholeheartedly agree. But I find that there's so often what I would describe as kind of static on the line. And I just wondered if you could say something about that and something about that sort of in the context of the course as well. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Juliet. Thanks for that question. Yeah, it's difficult. I would be lying if I said to you that I had a daily practice. I have a regular practice. And for me, it's kind of sitting with a tree up there. And if I can't actually sit with a tree because it's really inclement weather, I will dream with a tree. I will use my imagination to connect with that tree, knowing that in some unfathomable way we are connected. But the practice, the basic practice that we work with is a sitting practice. It sounds like the simplest, but it's actually the thing that is the most complicated. Not complicated, but the most difficult because it requires a commitment to do it. But it's the one that it offers. It's the fundamental. It's the foundational thing. Most people who work deeply with plants and animals, or are animal communicators or plant communicators, will tell you that the whole of the living world, when they look at us, they kind of say, please, can you be present? Please, can you be absolutely present to us? Not looking at your phone. All it needs is presence, and offering our presence properly, not having a schedule, finding ways of sitting and offering that as an offering and as an invitation for connection is a really profound thing. This is again where I think community really helps, because through that community you can hear the responses from others and the struggle of others, because it is a struggle sometimes before you can really lean into it. It can be a struggle. But to do that regularly, and that's why, for Feather, Firestone and Born, we make it a year and a day, because it takes that time to deepen into. We expect everything so quickly. We are, the generation of the soundbite and the 5-minute blog. And actually these things take time. We are running far too fast for humanity. We are running too fast for ourselves, let alone running at nature's pace. So having to slow down and make some space and some time is that. hoping that helps a little bit. I'm sure when we come to talking about Feather, Firestone and Bone, Natalie and Ruth might be able to help you a little bit more with that, with their experience of how they met the challenge and how they what they got out of it as well. Thanks for that question. Delphina. How do I say your name?
Delphina.
Delphina.
Yeah. Hi, thank you so much. This really resonates with me. I wanted to ask a question. I've been living for 3 years in nature in my camper van. And because I was alone, naturally the trees became friends and the nature spirits and the rivers suddenly you start seeing more and experience like, oh, that can happen. Oh, I can get a massage from a rock. Okay, well, sure. And everything sort of opened. But for me, the challenge now is to, when I go back in the human world, to understand humans.
Mhm.
And how I can, like, how I felt myself getting overwhelmed and sort of like everything I saw being done to my friends now sort of led to compassion fatigue. So how do you um when you live this and when you know this and when but there isn't people around that live that way also, how can you still be yourself and not lose yourself, or still feel the understanding for people and still connect? Like, I'm the one shouting out, oh, but you can talk to that tree, or you can ask that animal what he wants, but it just doesn't come in. Like, it doesn't. Sometimes you get like this, like, oh no, we're not going there. And I was wondering how you deal with that.
Yeah, it's a big one. I think again, it comes back to, I think you answered your own question. You know, when you don't have community around you that can support you in that. One of the things that, you know, another reason why I we set up Feather Firestone about is because we wanted to provide community for people. And I know, you know, community these days is such a complicated thing. We often don't find our community in the locality of our community. We often find our communities of interest here in these kind of spaces. And, you know, much as I would much prefer to be in a room sitting around a fire with everybody. This medium, we have to bless it in some way because it enables this. So trying to try, you know, getting that community and a place where you can go and you can grieve actually for that as well. And you can have those tender feelings and be met in that way, and to have that reflected from other members of the community. It's really important. You know, the way we're living these days, it's very unnatural for the human being. We you know, I suppose most of us at some soul level expected to come into a community where we would get up in the morning and everybody would share their dreams, and there would be horses in the paddock and dogs running around and children and elders and all sorts of things like that. You know, that is the way that is nourishing. We are, you know, we're community orientated beings. And that community is not just the human world, it's the community of all beings as well. So but we have to find in this artificial life, in this difficult life, we have to find ways where we can create those communities where we can share our dreams, where we can find compassion and hold each other through the grief for how things are, and find the courage to be the change we want to see in the world.
Yeah, exactly. I haven't found a place yet that goes as deeply, but I hope there is some out there. Maybe if anyone knows, that they could share it in the chat or something. That I
Are you
yeah, I'm
looking
really looking where.
Are you looking for a specific physical place or community, or are you looking?
I'm looking where like interspecies communication is just, it's not just a thing of it's a way of living. It's just being.
So you're
Yeah.
looking for a place to land where that's a way of being.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. There are some places. Depends on where are you in the world, Delphina?
At the moment in France, but I'm like I said, I'm with my van, so I can be in Spain tomorrow.
I know there's quite a number of communities in Portugal. I
Yeah.
don't know the names off the top of my head, but I know there are around. There's certainly around just over the hill from where I am in Wales. There's one here.
Okay.
There's a number in West Wales that I know of, but that's because I'm local to here. But if anybody does know of anywhere, please do kind of help Delphina out putting it in the chat.
Thank you so much.
Any other question? Oh, yes. Pete. Hi, Pete.
Hello. I wondered if you might talk a little bit about encounters. You mentioned that you kind of had an awakening of sorts when you were young in a particular place, and you also mentioned that you like sitting with trees. Um, I I did a course a couple of years ago with Eight Shields, if you've ever heard of them.
Yeah.
And we did quite a lot of work on encounters with animals, like when you stumble across a deer on a walk, and there's a moment when your eyes meet, and there's a connection between the two. And I wondered if that might have anything to do with your connecting with other beings.
Yeah. So we, so we try in a more how do I start with this? Okay, so whenever there is a connection or an encounter with a being that feels out of the ordinary. So, for example, I have a young robin that lives here. He was a fledgling here. He turned up in the summer, all brown little thing, and I kept saying, "Who are you? You're all brown. I don't know." And then he opened his beak, and it was a robin, and I've kind of watched him kind of get a red breast. Now he hops around all the time, so I see him a number of times daily. But there are occasions when he's clearly engaging me in some way. When he's doing something different. So, for example, sometimes he will come and he will sit on my windowsill here and he will look at me very, very pointedly. And for me, that's different from an everyday occurrence. That's a request to attend to a relationship that's being invited. And so I try my best to attend to that because that invitation feels really, really important. And building that relationship kind of gradually with, for example, the deer or the stag that you saw. For me, that stag is offering you medicine in some way. And the question is, what is that? And only you can know what that is. And so it's time for a bit of inquiry around that. It may be to take that into the dreaming and to meet the stag again and to ask. It may be that it's really clear for you. I work a lot with animal totems. It's part of my teaching as well. But they're all the better if they are animals that you can encounter around you, because it's part of learning the language of how creation is trying to speak to us. So, the old thing of divination at its basic form is a language that we agree, or a symbolic language that we agree with creation, so that we can have the conversations that we want to have, or that the creation, the universe wants to have with us, or all beings, or the energy nuivre wants to have with us. It's as if we are hollow bones through which, if we can make ourselves hollow bones, through which the universe can move, and we are the hands in this world. So divination at its basic point comes from that sense of an encounter with an animal. The question, what does that mean? What does it mean for me? And then understanding that when I encounter that animal again, when it's clearly an out of the usual occurrence or a more deep and meaningful occurrence, what does that now mean? Because I now have an agreement that that is something to attend to. So do you see that way of kind of, building that process of relating to how all creation is inviting us to be in relationship, in communication in some way? Does that help, Pete?
It does, thank you. Yeah, so it's a little bit like noticing, when you take time to listen, or you take time to notice and observe behavior or changes. And yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Yeah, and it is about making that distinction between, an animal just going about its business and, things that sometimes are just kind of accidentally, happen, and something that feels, that connection which feels just much more meaningful. There's a reaching out to us as humanity from the wild in some way.
Yeah, I would agree. It's a two-way thing, which is why I said when your eyes meet with that animal, sometimes there is a connection. It's one taking notice of each other, and
Yeah.
and like you say, you can go a step further with that. I'm sure.
Thanks, Pete. Thanks for your question. Are there any more questions? Oh, yeah, Rachel.
Did that automatically and then couldn't work out how to mute myself. Apologies. I'm curious, as I'm listening to you, what role do you think that shame plays in our disconnect? So as a therapist, like, I know that one of the things that destroys human to human connection, rapidly, the fastest, is shame. It's the destroying of that interpersonal bridge, basically. So I'm wondering, in a society that has a shame epidemic, basically, what role that plays in us breaking that interpersonal bridge between nature, and then for those of us who choose to reconnect, we are then also having that interpersonal bridge broken between the human to human again quite frequently. So I'm kind of curious what role it plays.
Yeah, I mean, I think shame is a way of, it can be used as a way of culture, of how we are uncultured. We are shamed out of things, certainly, being told that I was a dreamer and that I wouldn't do very well in school, and if I stopped dreaming, that was a way of shaming me out of a certain way of being.
Mm-hmm.
And I think as adults, we are invited to reflect on those things that have shaped us and the way that we had to shift in order to maybe survive or to thrive in a particular culture, in a particular place at a particular time. But as adults, if we're lucky, we get to do some reevaluation of that and to choose whether we want to keep acquiescing to that or whether we want to reclaim something that feels really deeply important to us.
I guess that can be easier said than done, though, sometimes, can't it? Because actually,
Absolutely.
I'm thinking about that kind of like human to human interpersonal bridge. Like, virtually all of us have to function in the society that we find ourselves living in. That is how we stay alive, how we survive.
Yeah, I think
So
there is
I'm sort of like curious about how that then erodes the bridge between us and the rest of the natural world as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that encultured shame has really eroded that. And I think I think that, again, that's the role of a community, a like-minded community, to hold space to strengthen that muscle of coming back to my true self and being able to manage the rough edges when we
Mhm.
against society again. But I also think there's another shame, and that is the shame that we feel as humans when we're out of kilter with ourselves, when we sell ourselves short,
Mhm.
when we're not in integrity. We kind of generally in the culture, you know, specifically in psychotherapeutic culture at the moment, it's very trendy to shame all shame. But actually, there is some shame. We wouldn't have shame if it didn't have some evolutionary benefit, and it does.
Mm.
If when we are in the wrong, it's so that we feel really uncomfortable about it. It's so that we know that we are out of integrity with ourselves. What's not helpful is other people shaming us because it benefits them to do that, or because it's done by rote, because they know no better. But there is a sense of shame that can arise in ourselves when we know that we are out of integrity. And I think that can become productive in sense. At some point, it can swap and it can become an equal force that starts to bring us back to ourselves, to wholeness. So I think it has you know, certainly that shame that you talk about has definitely, you know, done terrible things to our human sense of who we are and our relationship to all things. And it's still doing really difficult things to us because we feel a sense of shame for what we've done to the world, and it feels too overwhelming to enter into a space where we have to deal with that. And so
we have to actually face into a relationship where we've done damage. Yeah, it's really challenging,
and take account and take responsibility, and there's a lot of grief that comes with that. And again, you know, that's where doing this communally is really important, because it's really difficult to deal with all of that on your own. And I'm sure as a psychotherapist, are you a psychotherapist, Rachel?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm sure that are you meeting people with doing ecotherapy and people with, it's increasing. Yeah, thank you.
Can I also, just before I go, ask you where the communities in West Wales are that you referred to? Because I am
I'm talking about Teepee Valley, just over the corner of the head. There's Lammas. So there's Brithdir Mawr that is changing somewhat at the moment. And there are a few places up in North Wales as well, which I can't remember the names of now, but there are increasingly, because we've got here in Wales, we've got this amazing legislation called the Future Generations Act, by which we measure all pieces of law and legislation. And so there's been things like inducements or kind of encouragement for people to live very closely with the land, to form land-based communities and things here for quite a while, about 10 years already now.
Fabulous. I shall check those out when I move. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any others, or shall we move on to just saying a little bit about feather, fire, stone and bone? Okay, I'll do that. I don't think there's any more questions. So just for those of you who are here because you're interested in finding a community, you know, our feather, fire, bone, stone and bone came in as a bit of a guidance for me. I was becoming increasingly aware that people were really struggling, wanting to work and become more connected, to do the work of reconnection with the natural world, but struggling to do it alone. So we as a team have of teachers, and there's some brilliant teachers on it. Manda Scott, who's a fantastic author. She wrote the Boudica book. Some of you might know them. Carolyn Hillier does a lot of work, particularly with women. But she's also works with Proto-Celtic, and she sings, and she's an artist and has written a number of books. We've got Brother Spirit, from Plum Village. He was taught by Thich Nhat Hanh. He talks a lot about interbeing and practices. Dr. Andy Letcher, who is a folk musician, and he works a lot with plant medicines. He is a lecturer at Exeter College on their degree courses about magic and the more than human experience. Pat McCabe, an Indigenous leader in America, and ceremonialist. Colin Campbell, who's a white Sangoma from South Africa, one of my fellow founders of Anima Earth. He was raised in a traditional community in Botswana and initiated and taken through rites of passage right through and trained as a Sangoma and as a diviner there in South Africa. Breed Walsh, who's a therapist and works a lot with, she's a healer, works with heart open medicine and a lot with land and land spirit communication. And Cesar Rodriguez Garavado, he's the human rights lawyer I was telling you about. Just because we want people to have an experience of understanding that there's more going on in this world. We want to bring this very, what can feel very ephemeral and personal and delicate experience. We want to bring it into the culture, and for people like yourselves struggling to find ways back to this, to understand that this is a way forward. This is a very real thing. It's not just about wishy-washy people talking to trees. It's very real. It is being manifested in law. It is being manifested in science. The scientific community are opening to this now. So those are just some of the tutors on it. We do a range of things, and I'm sure Ruth and Natalie might tell you some of the things that really worked for them. But we try, knowing that everybody works differently, that everybody is wired differently, that everybody senses differently and learns differently. We use a variety of different experiences and techniques through the year to help you all find your own way. In general, we meet twice a month. The first one is a teaching session with one of our guest teachers and myself. And there's always some practice that you take away from that. And the practice builds gradually. And then halfway through the month, between the two teaching sessions, we have a circle. And they're really important. They're about building community, about listening to each other and gaining strength and understanding from hearing other people's experiences of the practices, the challenges, the difficulties. We are raggedly human. We kind of turn up going, yeah, it's been really difficult this year. And yeah, I sat for an hour and nothing happened, because we're in the realms of the real, not in the realms of like, oh, it's all wonderful and all the time. We want to be really real. Whatever feelings are coming up, we want to support and witness those as well. And it's in those spaces. Sometimes we will use them for dreaming practice. We teach a form of dreaming, a shamanic dreaming, that we do together online sometimes as well during those circles. And then during the year, you will also have them in the summer months. We will be doing a vigil. You will each sit vigil separately. And I know that might sound really, really daunting to some people now, sitting out through the night in your garden or somewhere local that is safe. We go through a lot of checks to make sure it's safe. And when I tell the students that at the beginning, everybody's like, oh, I don't think I can do that. And it brings up a lot of anxiety. And I think Natalie and Ruth will tell you, by the time you get to it, everybody's like, yep, we're ready. We're going to give it a go. And it's a really amazing and beautiful thing. And I hold the fire for everybody that night. So we're all doing it together. And then we also have a closing ceremony. So we do ceremony, individual ceremony, and then we do ceremony together in this communal space, using the imaginal realms and the dreaming as well. And it's incredible how potent and how powerful that is. I think that's probably enough. You may have some questions, really happy, but I would also really encourage you to ask Natalie and Ruth. And maybe before I open to questions, I might invite Natalie and Ruth just to talk a little bit, maybe about what was the journey like for you, or what did you get out of it? You know, what was the deep dive for you? Maybe Natalie, if I could ask you to say something to that, what you might feel valuable to a group thinking about taking the year.
There's so much. I would say for me, I had started this journey of reconnecting with the natural world before Feather, Fire, Stone, and Bone. I am a student of Joanna Macy's work that reconnects. And when I started this course, I was in my second year of Seminary of the Wild, which basically does the same thing. But this course, for me, deepened it in a way that really resonated with me because of the ceremony, because of speaking about magic, speaking about some of the practices that we did, the shamanic journeying and the dreaming. I love that. And that was the part that was missing for me in all of the other things that I had studied. The vigil was just unbelievable. And I never would have had the courage to do that had it not been for the tending all the way along of Angharad, who always created such a sense of safety and being held and being caretaken, that by the time we got to that, I had slept out in a tent with others. I had never spent a night awake with nothing. And I did it on my land, so it wasn't that I was in an unfamiliar place. But as you said, by the middle of the night, your mind begins to play tricks on you, and you see things that aren't necessarily there. And at some point, you just have to go with that. And it was life-changing. That experience was life-changing. Even more so was the closing ceremony, which was all done virtually. We were brought to a place that there was a fire, and we were all together, and all of the things that went on there felt so holy. For me, that part of the spiritual part of things is really important, and that's what's lacking in so many other courses for me. This had that as well as practical things. I was amazed. I have been amazed at how long it takes and how much work it takes to finally get to the point where, as a modern person, you can slow down and really just sit and be present with the natural world and listen and be open to everything that is trying to get your attention and communicate. And we just go around deaf. And it needs to be done in a very reverential, respectful way. It's like forming any kind of relationship. It can't be done quickly. But we learned how to do that too. So I am at the point now where I am about to create my own community. This one is beautiful and we still have this, but I want one in the physical. I want the fire that I can really sit at and be with people. And I feel that I have what I need to delve into creating that. And that is from this course, absolutely from this course. I cannot recommend this enough. I could go on, but I won't. We'll have Ruth take her turn.
Hi everyone. Yeah, it is quite a hard task, Angharad's asked of us, to kind of give you something of a flavor of such a profound experience, but such a rich one with so many different things that happened in it. But I mean, I was making a few notes to try to talk to, and perhaps I'll touch on some different aspects. So I felt like the year in a day was really important. I'd done lots of different courses, lots of different work, in-person retreat, shorter courses. There is something so fundamental about being in community and in space through that full year as things unfold both within your life but also in the work that we're doing, and also that you're giving the time and the space, because you can't rush some of these practices. I mean, Angharad talked about one of our hardest tasks, which it definitely was, which was to regularly sit in the same place and be there and notice and listen and tune in and build relationship. And it was the constant that kept through the year, but how different that was every time we went there, and all the different sort of beings that suddenly would speak, and the appreciation for things as we slowed and opened and started to listen. And I think it's changed us all so incredibly deeply, and we're all looking at what our next offering is and how we take that work forward in different ways in our own lives. For me, it's given me the confidence to speak on stage, something that I would have always massively balked at. I found myself like on a stage in front of nearly 300 people the other day, just having an opportunity that felt like it had come, just dropped into my lap. And I'm sure that's not quite the case, but I did it, and I found the strength from feeling like the way I want to live my life and the values that I have are valid, and there are others that feel like that too. And I think community cannot be stressed enough. And I know virtual is not my favorite place. I would rather physically be in circle around a fire. But I also have 2 really young children, and so this is a way that I can do this and still give this work my time at this point in my life. And it links you with people all around the world, which is so powerful, because we've had perspectives from different teachers and indigenous teachers here, and there's commonality in our humanity, and that was amazing. But perhaps practices are different, or we didn't know of them. So it's like a beautiful toolkit where you're like, okay, we're going to work through this together, and we're going to keep coming back together in circle to share what that is as a lived experience. So yeah, I equally cannot speak highly enough about it, but it is profoundly changing. And I now feel through my practice as a teacher and as an artist, I've got a real sense of where I want to go and what my gifts are that I want to share.
Thank you both. Thank you both very much. And thank you so much for being on the journey as well for you. It's just been such a lovely, lovely group to be with. Any questions from any of you, either for me or for Natalie and Ruth? We're really happy. We're at your disposal right now to anything that you're sitting on. Sophie. Oh, Sophie, and then Pete.
Hi, thanks for that. That was very inspiring. I came on this chat today, thinking about possibly signing up for the course. I think, am I right? It's a Tuesday that it's on.
It is, you're right, yes.
Does the circle group then also meet on a Tuesday, or can it be a different day?
The circles jump around.
Yeah.
Because we're very aware, it's a terrible thing, isn't it? Oh, Tuesday night is my choir night, so if it was all on a Tuesday.
I have 3 things I already potentially do on a Tuesday, and I could do once a month to do this, but 2 Tuesdays doing this would be hard. So that's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, we move them around for that reason. Thank you. Pete.
I was curious to hear a little bit more about the dreaming aspect, just because I can't remember which of your 2 advocates, whether it was Ruth, who mentioned journeying. And I did a drum birthing workshop a few years ago, and there was a little bit of, I guess it's a pagan tradition of journeying through drumming. And I wondered if it was something along those lines, or is it something that you do when you're asleep, or is it daydreaming? What exactly are we talking about here?
So I guess it's a hybrid of what you do when you're sleeping and what you're doing when you're daydreaming. People talk about it as dreaming awake. We call in this culture here, in both the Brythonic tradition, we call it dreaming, and we don't use a drum. We use voice.
Okay. So is that like a led meditation almost?
No, it's you're guided kind of a little bit just into it until you get used to doing it, and then it's a drone song that will keep you there, and you take your own journey. We pair you up with an animal, so you're encouraged to kind of have an animal guide for it. So it might seem similar, but we teach you to do it very deeply and very carefully, so that you can build a really alive dream world. So it's a way of giving yourself some time to be with your imagination and open yourself to the prompts of the universe while you're conscious, if you like.
That sounds fascinating. Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Can I just say one thing about that, Pete? I have always struggled with journeying to a drum beat. I find it distracting. But the droning was perfect for me. I had never encountered that before, and this just worked so well for me.
No, that is interesting. I mean, I must admit, when I mentioned meditation, I find that very difficult. And actually, I found funny things that are meditative useful, whether that be juggling or playing the didgeridoo or whatever it is, when you're not overthinking stuff. And so that's why I was curious as to what the practice was. So yeah, it makes sense. I agree. The drumming, especially other people drumming, can be very distracting. So yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
In the same way, Pete, as we also understand, so there's a lot that we inquire into your particular way. It's about you finding the way that works for you. So even though we do a lot of sitting practice, in a particular place, there's also an invitation, if walking is actually better for you, to walk in a particular place, that also does it. And I find meditation, sitting meditation, quite difficult. But I do my meditation walking in the morning with my dog, but I also do have a sitting practice with a tree. But yeah, it's about finding your own way, because there is no one way that fits all. We are all made differently, and so our connective tissue with all that is different, and so it should be.
If I can say one thing as well, I know that this becomes something for people that I don't see really big visions. I don't see this, I don't see that. And I think a lot of us get in our headspace worrying, am I doing this right? I can't do this, a bit like meditation. And the massive breakthrough for me was just to tell myself to stop looking with my eyes, because my experience of it isn't hugely visual. It's really sensed. It's quite hard for me to articulate, but it isn't like watching a movie. It isn't like just, there's many senses and different things happening, and it's really clear. But to have found my trust in it and to have quietened that voice of doubt was a big breakthrough in my ability to have those deep and profound connections and communications.
That's really useful. Thank you. I massively appreciate that, because that's something I think most people will come up against, myself included. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's a little bit like interpreting communication from whatever being we're talking about. We very ignorant as human beings, thinking that they're going to communicate somehow in human language, and that's just not how it works.
The Queen's English, yeah. Thanks, Pete. Penny.
Thank you, everyone. This has been wonderful. If I understood Ruth correctly, she talked about coming to the same place and sitting over a period. I assume the whole course, there's a place that you connect with on a regular basis. The same place. Did I understand that correctly? Yes. So my question is, how would this course work with someone who leads a more nomadic lifestyle, who isn't in the same place all the time? Thank you.
You're not the first to come and ask that question, because how nomadic is nomadic? Are you moving all the time, or between a certain set of places?
A bit of both,
Okay.
actually.
So there's lots of ways that we teach. So you find a place that is your main base that you will go to, but you can also use your imagination to connect to it as well. So as part of your dreaming practice, you can connect to it, and I certainly do that. I still feel, just because it's a very narrow way of thinking, that you have to be next to something to connect in with it. It's an old, it's an outmoded way of thinking. We know the universe is far more complex than that.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions, or is it time for us to draw this evening to a close? Okay, well, my thanks to Natalie and Ruth for kindly coming along and joining us and sharing so generously about their experiences. And to each and every one of you for your deep listening, for bringing yourselves here, for listening to the song in your bones, and heeding some kind of a call to at least dip your toe and find out more about what this journey might be about. And I very much hope to meet some of you along the way in this coming year and a day. Feather, Fire, Stone and Bone begins on the 9th of December. If any of you are interested in joining us, it would be lovely to have your company. Many thanks. Diolch yn fawr iawn i chi gyd.